It began with a locked door, a broken latch, and a curious night guard. Inside the Watergate Hotel in 1972, 5 men were caught sneaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters. It seemed like a simple break-in, maybe political mischief. But in the months that followed, 2 journalists connected the dots. Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein exposed a secret network of hush money, wiretaps, and White House cover-ups. People called them paranoid. They were told to drop it. But the truth was bigger than anyone imagined. Their reporting brought down the President of the United States. The world watched in disbelief. An outlandish theory had turned into undeniable fact. And that story is only the beginning. History is filled with wild claims, whispered warnings, and unbelievable accusations that turned out to be terrifyingly real. 1. Operation Northwoods, America's forgotten war plan. During the Cold War, tension with Cuba was explosive. In 1962, top officials at the U.S. Department of Defense drafted a plan called Operation Northwoods. It proposed a series of fake terrorist attacks on American cities. The goal was to generate public outrage and justify a full-scale war against Cuba. The plan included sinking refugee boats, staging hijackings, and faking casualties using actors. President John F. Kennedy rejected the proposal outright. It was filed away, never discussed publicly. For decades, it lived only in rumor. But in 1997, declassified documents revealed everything. The U.S. government had seriously considered attacking its own people just to ignite a war. 2. MK-Ultra, the CIA's dark experiments. In the 1950s and 60s, the CIA was desperate to find new tools in the fight against communism. One of their most secretive efforts was MK-Ultra, a mind control program that sounded like science fiction. The agency funded covert experiments on unwitting civilians. People were drugged with LSD, hypnotized, subjected to sleep deprivation, and psychologically tortured, all to see if minds could be controlled or erased. For years, survivors were dismissed as delusional. The truth came out in 1975 during congressional hearings. Thousands of documents were uncovered. MK-Ultra wasn't a theory, it was real, and it had ruined lives in the shadows of democracy. 3. Big Tobacco, knew and lied. In the mid-20th century, cigarettes were everywhere. Doctors recommended them, athletes endorsed them, and society accepted them. But a few scientists noticed troubling patterns: rising cancer rates, respiratory disease, and addiction. When whistleblowers claimed tobacco companies knew about these risks and suppressed the data, few believed them. Then came the leak. In 1994, internal documents were released during a lawsuit against the tobacco industry. They showed clear evidence that executives knew cigarettes were deadly and addictive. Not only had they lied under oath, they had spent decades manipulating research and advertising. A paranoid theory turned into a billion-dollar reckoning. 4. The Tuskegee Experiment. 40 years of silence. Between 1932 and 1972, hundreds of black men in Tuskegee, Alabama, were enrolled in a government study on syphilis. The men were told they were being treated for bad blood. In truth, they were deliberately left untreated so researchers could observe the disease's progression. Even after penicillin became the standard cure, it was withheld. For 40 years, this horrifying secret remained buried. In 1972, a whistleblower finally exposed the experiment. Public outrage followed, and the U.S. government issued an official apology. But the damage was done. It wasn't just unethical, it was monstrous, and it had been dismissed as a conspiracy until proven true. 5. Water contamination. In Flint. In 2014, residents of Flint, Michigan, started complaining about the water. It smelled foul, tasted strange, and made children sick. Officials dismissed their concerns. Some labeled them alarmists or anti-government troublemakers. It took a persistent group of parents, activists, and scientists to reveal the truth. The city had switched to a cheaper water source without proper treatment. The result was lead poisoning on a massive scale. Thousands of children were exposed. This wasn't just bureaucratic failure, it was betrayal. a public health disaster had been ignored, denied, and downplayed, until it could no longer be hidden. 6. Surveillance state. Edward Snowden's revelations. For years, people joked about being spied on by their smartphones, laptops, and emails. It seemed like a paranoid fantasy. That changed in 2013 when Edward Snowden, a former NSA contractor, leaked classified documents. They proved the U.S. government was collecting vast amounts of data on ordinary citizens without their knowledge. Phone records, emails, internet history, all monitored. Suddenly, the idea that they're watching us wasn't funny anymore. It was fact. Snowden became both a hero and a traitor, depending on who you asked. But the world could no longer deny that mass surveillance was real. 7. Project Sunshine. Experimenting on the dead. In the 1950s, during the height of nuclear weapons testing, scientists wanted to understand how radiation affected human tissue. So they started collecting samples. But not just any samples. The US government, through Project Sunshine, secretly gathered bones from deceased infants and children across the world, often without permission from families. It sounds like horror fiction. But in 1995, documents confirmed that body parts were taken without consent, cataloged, and studied to measure radiation absorption. Mothers never knew what happened to their children's remains. The truth surfaced decades later, validating years of dark speculation. 8. COINTELPRO. The FBI's secret war on activists. In the 1960s and 70s, civil rights leaders, anti-war protesters, and black activists suspected they were being targeted by the FBI. Their phones were tapped, their meetings infiltrated, their reputations destroyed. Many believed the government was trying to silence them. They were right. COINTELPRO, short for Counterintelligence Program, was an FBI initiative designed to disrupt political movements deemed subversive. It used surveillance, blackmail, disinformation, and illegal tactics. Martin Luther King Jr. was one of its prime targets. The FBI even sent him anonymous letters urging him to commit suicide. In 1971, a group of activists broke into an FBI office and uncovered the truth. 9. Gladio. NATO's secret army. In post-World War II Europe, NATO feared a Soviet invasion. So it established secret stay-behind armies known as Operation Gladio. These paramilitary groups were trained and funded to act in case of communist takeover. But over time, Gladio cells were linked to bombings, political assassinations, and destabilizing democratic governments, all under the guise of anti-communism. For decades, Gladio was dismissed as Cold War fiction. But in the 1990s, the Italian government admitted its existence. Other European countries followed. Gladio wasn't just real, it had operated in the shadows of modern history, shaping it in ways we may never fully understand. 10. UFOs and the Pentagon. For years, reports of unidentified flying objects were dismissed as fantasy. Pilots, soldiers, and civilians described strange shapes in the sky, impossible flight patterns, and sudden disappearances. They were ignored or ridiculed. But in 2020, the Pentagon officially released footage of unidentified aerial phenomena recorded by Navy pilots. The videos showed crafts moving in ways no known aircraft could. The US government confirmed they had been studying these phenomena under classified programs for years. Suddenly, the question of, "Are we alone?" wasn't just for science fiction. The stigma faded, and what was once lunacy became an open conversation. The thin line between madness and truth. Theories once branded as dangerous, crazy, or delusional have often turned out to be warnings the world ignored. History shows us that truth doesn't always come with a spotlight. Sometimes it hides behind locked doors, buried files, and nervous whispers. It waits for someone brave enough to ask the uncomfortable questions and stubborn enough to demand answers. So the next time you hear a theory that sounds too wild to be true, remember this. Some of the most unbelievable stories were real all along. If you found this video eye-opening, give it a like, share it with someone who needs to know the truth, and subscribe for more documentaries that challenge what you think you know. And if you're ready for another deep dive, check out our next video on the biggest lies in modern history and how they unraveled.